Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's episode is gonna be a banger, and I know you're gonna love this one. I do have some awesome stories in today's episode, so if you want to see an extra long episode of Entitled Parents, let's hit 3,000 likes in the next 24 hours, and the next episode of Entitled Parents will be extra long. So, smash that like button, then sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some Entitled Parents. So, first things first, this is not your typical entitled parent story. There's almost no direct confrontation between me and the entitled mum, or the entitled kid, or anyone else. But the revenge on the entitled mum is the sweetest revenge possible. That's enough fooling around, let's go. So, I've been practicing for a classical piano audition at my local conservatory. This is the equivalent of a music university in other countries, because it's always been my dream to perform classical music. I've been studying hard for 4 or 5 months, and I feel so proud for all the work that I've managed to finish. The fact is that classical piano is one of the hardest sections of the conservatory to get into, because there's always so many people that want to get in and try. This is about all that I have to say about the backstory. Now, my mum knew the entitled mum for a long time. The entitled mum is selfish, rude, and always likes to brag about the entitled kid's abilities with other people that don't want to hear anything from her. The entitled mum is also hella rich, and she doesn't make a problem to brag about that too. The entitled kid is a pianist also. He's younger than me, about 11 years younger, and entitled to the bone. I wouldn't say he's not skilled, but we shared a piano once, and he seems to not care about anything but his playing. I complimented him once for his playing, and he just didn't care. Plus, he can't stand me playing for more than 5 minutes. The entitled mum would always keep on bragging with my mum about entitled kid being a young talent, a skilled pianist, and a prolific composer. As soon as she discovered that I wanted to go to the conservatory too, she seemed to not like any sort of competition for her son, and subtly made comments on my playing with my mum, trying to convince her not to let me do this exam, despite the fact that she'd never actually heard me play. This obviously made me incredibly upset, because I sadly knew that who is richer and or who has contacts inside of the conservatory was pretty much assured to pass. I don't know if this is only a thing here or in most academic ambiences regarding music, but this actually made me feel quite worried. I had the chance to hear the entitled kid studying a quite simple etude. My teacher told me so much information on the correct performing and phasing about that etude, and I felt so informed about it. So as soon as the entitled kid finished playing and asked me if I heard how good his playing was, I just submerged him with a harsh and frustrated critique. First of all, there was no phrasing. Dynamics were completely ignored. He barely used any pedal when it was asked. There were no accents, no crescendos, no final diminuendo, no legato. Second of all, I told him how there was a huge lack of decent interpretation and too quick of a tempo to be satisfying to the ear. He was shocked. He surely wasn't expecting that, and he probably didn't know half of these words. Obviously, the entitled kid told everything to the entitled mum, which reported everything to my mum, saying that I insulted the entitled kid's playing and that I should have to apologize. The entitled mum said that I wasn't nice and polite enough to have private lessons with a teacher at the conservatory, and with my aggressive attitude, I wouldn't have lasted long. She once again boasted about her contacts and walked away. I quickly forgot about him and the entitled mum and continued studying, until 1 week ago, and the exam results were sent to us via email. This year's exam was based on a video with specific requirements that I had to send to examiners in order to pass. So I think it was a little bit easier to pass, although examiners would probably have been more fussy and would give more weight to the errors that they find. I thankfully managed to pass. I did it, and I cannot describe my joy and relief in knowing that I passed. And then the entitled kid came to mind. We spent some time searching through my conservatory website in order to see a full list of the students who passed. And I felt so good, so avenged, knowing that the entitled kid had failed. Yes, he failed. I watched the list for 10 more times not believing it, but despite the money and all of the contacts, he still managed to fail. I've never felt so good in my life, and I doubt that I ever will. So, the moral of the story. At least wait for the results to boast about something, or please don't boast about anything at all. You know, the OP's probably summed this up better in a few words that I can sum up in a few sentences. If you're going to be so entitled as to think that your precious little son is the best pianist in the world and just a blessing to this earth, well, maybe you should be able to back it up before talking smack. I can only imagine the look on the entitled mum's face when she found out that her amazing little son had failed the test, and honestly, it's something that I wish I was there to see. But we both just know that at the end of the day, the entitled mum's thrown a fit and gone and spoken to the manager and probably got exactly what she wanted. I mean, that's usually how these things go, right? My grandma is an interesting individual. One may place her in the Karen category. She's from a small town where you're either very well off and waspy, or you smoke and live in an old school made into an apartment building. She is on the waspy side, knows everything and everyone, and always will find something about you to nitpick at. Fun times. The best time of all was in 8th grade. She was a math teacher in my school for junior year, and oh boy, was that a dandy time. Because I was her granddaughter, that made a huge target on my back. Every day she would watch me like a hawk and wait for the split second that I would look away and then shout, "Granddaughter, pay attention and don't make me tell your mother that you're goofing off in my class." And as you can imagine, the whole class would giggle. She would grin and her ego would inflate like swim shorts when you first walk into the water. One time I accidentally wore slippers to school, and for the rest of the year she would bring it up like, "Can you not remember the equation like you couldn't remember your shoes?" Cue malicious grins and even more laughter. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when I got a boyfriend. So, for a bit of backstory here, I was held back in kindergarten, so I'm a year older than everyone in my 8th grade class. I was dating a boy in 10th grade, but he skipped ahead a grade, so he's actually a year younger than his 10th grade class. That made our age difference to be only about a year apart. However, from an outside perspective, when you first hear a 10th grade boy is dating an 8th grade girl, I'm sure your first reaction would be an ew. And boy, did my grandma eat that up like it was her very last meal. Anytime we would visit, she would make side comments like, "We know that granddaughter prefers older men, right granddaughter?" Or, "If it was my child, I certainly wouldn't approve, but I guess times are a little different." It was annoying, but it wasn't interfering with my life. That is, until she started to gossip about me to other teachers. She would tell them that I was sneaking around with an older boy. I was probably experimenting with things not meant for my age. That I was going into teachers' lounges and bathrooms with him, and she also heavily implied that my parents were against all this. For context, my parents know how old we both were and actually aren't crazy. My boyfriend was the quietest and nerdiest kid in his grade. It took us both 2 weeks of holding hands before we even kissed. So none of this was true, but that didn't stop the rumors. During lunch, I'd get asked by girls if it was true that I'd done certain things, and if I was in class and I would ask my teacher to use the restroom, they would refuse. And if they did let me go, they would interrogate me for several minutes first to make sure I wasn't sneaking off to be with my older boyfriend. Before any of this, I was literally a fly on the wall and I was completely fine with that. Now I was miserable and felt completely helpless. After coming home crying for who knows how many days in a row, my mum got fed up. I remember her screaming, "That's it," grabbing her keys and storming out the door. When she returned, she said that grandma wouldn't be bothering me anymore, and once I got older, she told me a brief summary of what happened. Basically, my mum arrived and approached her calmly, explaining to her that I was a child and she has control of the situation. She even explained the age difference, and after asking her to back off and stop telling lies to her co-workers, being my teachers, grandma scoffed and said, "You don't know what she could be doing behind closed doors. I'm just keeping an eye out for her." And this set my mum off. She told me that she started yelling at my grandma about shaming her own granddaughter and how miserable I was. She said that she has no right to say or do any of this, and what she was doing was cruel and inappropriate. And my grandma's response? "How dare you enter my home and accuse me of this? Get out of my house." So, my mum left. And the next day, my grandma completely avoided eye contact with me. She didn't even try and call on me for answers or point out what kind of clothes I was wearing. She just averted her gaze and did her job. Finally. Rumors continued just for a little bit, but then people caught on that it really wasn't as scandalous as the rumors portrayed, and we were left alone. How did all of this end? Well, like you'd expect. Grandma acts like it never happened, never brings it up, and avoids the conversation if it's about the time that she taught me. It's irritating, but at the same time, it's expected. Now that I'm an adult and we're all aware of her silly ways, we can just smile and nod until we go home, where we can then rant about how mean she was during dinner. You know, I just cannot imagine a scenario where a grandma would go out of their way to completely tarnish the reputation of their granddaughter at the school that they not only work at, but the school that the kid goes to. Like, as a teacher, you have this position where you can make it go one of two ways. You can either try and make sure that she has the best schooling experience possible, or you can do what this entitled grandma did, and 1, try and take parental decisions away from the mother of the child, and 2, give her a horrible reputation and make everyone think that she's an awful person. I know which one I do, and the one that the majority of people would do, but I guess we don't all have the mindset of an awful entitled parent. So, I work for a small production company and we do a ton of charitable work. That day, a few of our crew members, myself included, were lent out for a Make-A-Wish type thing for a girl whose wish was to have her original song made into a music video. She was battling cancer, so, of course, every precaution had to be taken. The director reserved a scenic section of the park and got all set up there so we could be outdoors with plenty of distance. Apparently this was also the only section of the park with a picnic area. We weren't aware of this, and occasionally some people would come over pretty miffed, asking why we'd reserved the whole picnic area. But before they could get the whole complaint out, they'd realise the situation and leave us be, embarrassed to even have asked. This young lady was around 14 or 15 and was having a great time shooting these scenes for her music video. Until, cue the Karen. A mess of cheap Botox and overpriced athleisure gear started crossing over our clearly marked barricades with her daughter, who was around 6 or 7. Our production assistant rushed over, figuring that she was just too dumb to notice all of our signage and physical blockades, and explained in a hushed tone that she was intruding on a private film set. Karen replied, intentionally loudly by the way, that it was a public park and she had every right to use any part of it as she pleased. Now, was it a tad bit inconvenient that we'd commandeered a large strip of public land that happened to be the only area with seating? Absolutely. But the handful of people who'd wander over to complain immediately processed the nature of this project and gladly made other plans for themselves. Karen wasn't budging, but we had a permit from the city to be there, so we let her know she could quiet down or shove off. Little did she know, we actually had a right to have her ejected if she was being disruptive to our filming. We didn't really want to though, and we didn't exactly have the manpower to do it without calling authorities, and we didn't want to put a damper on this fun event or even make a scene in front of her daughter. So, the director paused filming to try and de-escalate things. There was supposed to be a liaison from the Make-A-Wish style program, but the catering guy had gotten lost on the way to the park and she'd gone to look for him. So, the director showed Karen the permit that we had and warned her a final time that she either needed to watch calmly or get out of there. She pulls her younger daughter off to the side and started trying to goad her into singing. The kid was better able to read the room than the mum was because she was too embarrassed to start singing and tried saying that she wanted to wait until she got home, but Karen kept pointing her phone camera at the kid and shrieking that she wanted her to sing there and then so that she could film it. Eventually she started playing some Disney songs on her phone and the kid began hissing along, interrupting our footage, which was much to the Karen's satisfaction. Finally, the director had had enough and informed her that even though she technically moved off the land that we'd physically reserved, that the noise that she and her daughter were generating was disruptive, so he could still have her removed. But the Karen's pride wouldn't allow her to simply walk away from the situation, so once her daughter had ceased this loud off-key singing, she continued lingering even as her child begged her to go play by a pond almost a quarter of a mile over. Karen continually tried to force her daughter into the shot with hopes that it would make us move, cruelly getting her kids' hopes up and dashing them repeatedly. So I guess the kid wasn't especially bright either. She'd keep saying, "Look baby, they're making a movie. Quick, go be in the movie so you can get famous. Hurry up." So the girl would run onto our set, or at least try to, and a PA or the key grip would return her to her mum before she was able to run across our shot. But her daughter's anguishing cries of disappointment at not becoming famous each time we returned her to her mum were enough to render most of the footage, if not useless, at least a lot less fun than it was intended to be. I guess Karen didn't think that we'd heard her goading her child into disrupting us with fake promises of superstardom, because when the director came over for her final warning, she tried to play dumb saying, "Oh, I think she's just set on using the picnic space since this is the only picnic space in the entire park. I guess it would probably just be easier for you to move now, huh?" She said this with a combination of faux sweetness and imagined authority. Clearly, she had no idea what it takes to set up for a film if she thought that we could just move locations on a whim. The director turned out to be bluffing on calling the cops because he didn't want to create a scene until the liaison returned. So he just had a couple of big crew guys keep her and her daughter at bay. Eventually the liaison did come back, but honestly, she wasn't particularly helpful. Karen deduced that she was the one in charge and who everyone was waiting for in order to take action, so magically shaped up the minute she appeared and stood quietly to the side. So when every crew member descended on the liaison at once, she just meekly said, "Well, it's fine if she watches, right? People are just curious what's going on." Thankfully, the girl in the video had been having her makeup done for most of this while we filmed a backup dancer scene, so she didn't really notice most of the debacle and didn't care one way or another. Because Karen had a little kid with her, the girl didn't say she could watch, even though she was visibly uncomfortable at the strange audience. She kept waving to and winking at the little girl though, who thought she was some kind of celebrity. It was actually pretty cute and a perfect compliment to her music video. Karen hated that and kept muttering to passerbyers, trying to surmount insurrection, but unbeknownst to her, just about everyone in the general area was affiliated with our shoot. She did manage to find one or two people who were irritated about the picnic area being closed, thinking that we were just some greedy private party who sectioned it off from other guests. But then they realised that it was some kind of film production and started milling around out of idle curiosity. Again, we were mostly filming backup dancers at this point, who were a couple of the girls' friends, so I give credit to Karen that if she wasn't paying a lot of close attention to the filming itself, it may not have been immediately obvious what exactly we were doing at that point. that still doesn't make what she did next okay. She'd make the occasional comment to some of the other picnic people and was winning some of them over. She'd say something like, "But do they need the entire space?" and get an affirmative nod. Whatever. I don't think the other people were really listening that closely, as they were watching too intently, waiting for someone famous to pop out in the music video. Our tech people had determined that it wasn't interfering with the audio, so we'd begun to ignore her as long as she stayed out of the way. Then, the star girl comes out for her big emotional dance scene, and she's really giving it her all. So Karen decides to throw in another blow by turning to the woman nearest to her and saying, again, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh look, it's one of those girls who thinks it's cool to pretend to be a boy." You'd think that Karen would have stopped for a second to consider that maybe the girl was not cultivating a new look and in fact had cancer. Or better yet, that maybe a stranger's hairstyle wasn't her business in any case. And maybe that her not having eyebrows or arm hair either was a clue. But no, this was too much for Karen to think of. So, our poor starring girl hears this and crumples up into tears, now assuming that the crowds who had been gathering throughout the day were not doing so because they thought she was some kind of famous pop star, but instead to gawk her because she was strange looking. She rushed away, and those standing anywhere near Karen hurried off to make it clear that they weren't associated with her. That's when the liaison realized what we'd been trying to warn her about with Karen's behavior and tore into her along with several members of the girl's extended family. Like a true coward, Karen didn't even try to apologize. She just bolted away as quickly as she could, saying, "You know, maybe we'll find a different spot since you're clearly busy," as though she were doing us a special favor. Luckily, our lead girl's entire extended family was there and cheered her up very quickly. And some supportive civilians had showed up with genuine curiosity about the film set, then loved watching her dance for no other reason than that they loved watching her dance. So she was quite happy and having fun again very quickly after Karen skulked off. But still, this was really quite a hurtful and inappropriate spectacle. If she gets this worked up over a picnic table, I can only imagine when her daughter starts to face life's real challenges. So, there's not a lot that I can say about this because a story like this actually makes me physically angry. Like, what this entitled mum did is absolutely not okay in any circumstance, and for the life of me, I can't work out what goes through your head before you say or do something like this. What annoys me more than anything is the fact that this person is a mother and is allowed to raise a child despite the fact that her child is most likely going to turn out exactly like she is. I have no doubt that she is not only an atrocious person, but an atrocious parent as well, and I hate to think about how her daughter's going to grow up having a mum like this. This story has really topped the entitled parents chart for me, and I can guarantee it has for most of you as well. Alright everyone, that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video as much as I enjoyed making it, don't forget to smash that like button, and just a reminder that if we can hit 3,000 likes on this video within the next 24 hours, the next episode of Entitled Parents I upload will be extra long. Today's episode was a bit of a taste of a long Entitled Parents video, but I'm happy to make them even longer. So, if you're keen for an extra long episode of Entitled Parents, you know what to do, smash that like button down below. What you are going to see on your screen right now are two of my awesome videos, one of which I would highly suggest you click on and go down that rabbit hole of Entitled Parents. Otherwise though, I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow for another episode of Entitled Parents. Bye.